Hi, I am Epy Pengelly Armiger, and this is my oral explanation to go along with my written documentation and music performance of the Pavan and Galliard of Albarti, written by Innocentio Alberti. This is for Henry's Holiday Huzzah, aka Midwinter's 2023, as my Arts and Science entry. That being said, this music will also be used by me and my partner, Lady Catherine, in the Pas de Deux equestrian competition at Atlantian Spring Coronation 2023. So be sure to go to Spring Coronation and watch Lady Catherine and myself ride along to this music. So that is the short introduction of what led into me picking music to perform for Henry's Holiday Huzzah. Now, I have been playing in a collegiate amateur early music ensemble for over a decade, and so knowing that this event was coming up, I really wanted to enter something musical into the A&S competition. That being said, I also was one of the two people that came up with the judging, the scoring for the Pas de Deux. Doña Zara de la Vega and I worked on it together, and I knew that there was going to be a musical aspect, including the documentation for the musical aspect for the scoring for that competition at Spring Coronation. And so I wanted to find something that I could use for both entries. Now, having been in a collegiate ensemble for over a decade, I have a lot of music and I have a lot of programs from former concerts, one of which was based on the court of Henry VIII and his time period. So I went to look at that program to look at what music I already had that'd be appropriate for usage. It was important to me to find music that would work to ride our horses to, which involved having some sort of being upbeat, generally speaking, having some sort of tempo change. You know, we wanted it to be something lively and fun. So looking at this set of music, you know, there was the program of music for this concert, which there's no date on this concert, so I don't remember when I played it, but I have the program, I have the music, I played it at some point between 2009 and now. You know, I went through a couple of the different pieces, listening to them on YouTube and Amazon Music before listening to the Pavan and Galliard of Albarti, written by Innocentio Alberti. Now, after listening to this Pavan and Galliard, you know, I thought it might be a couple renditions on YouTube and Amazon Music, as I mentioned. I thought it might be a good choice, so I went ahead and sent it to my partner for the Pas de Deux, Lady Catherine. Now, she thought it sounded great, so I decided the next step of how to make this music work for us, because some of the recordings we found, which are documented, the various recordings in my full written documentation, some were too fast to ride to, some were too slow to ride to, and so I really want, and there are different arrangements of, you know, repeated so many times or only gone through once, and I needed to find a way and work with Lady Catherine in review processes for how to make an arrangement that was going to work for us on our horses. So what I ended up doing is I would record the top line of the piece to my metronome and then go to the barn with it, ride my horse that I'm riding in the Atlantian Coronation Pas de Deux with the music, you know, see how it went, whether it was fitting within the 4-minute time frame that Doña Zara had set up as part of the parameters for the competition, or if it was, you know, too long, because some of the tempos had the piece going too long, some of the arrangements had it going too long, some of them it wasn't varied enough, and you know, kind of doing a back and forth a couple times. You can see the chart of that in the written documentation, and again, sending it also to Lady Catherine to see how it went for her on her horse Spidey. We ended up changing the pattern that we were riding to a couple times to accommodate the music as well. Once we discovered, what was the best tempo, what was the best arrangement, and it was a very interesting and fun process to, record something at home, go to the barn, ride my horse, write a review, go home, like go back home, record something else, back and forth a number of times, and I also got input from Maîtresse Ilzella de Narbonne, also for the arrangement for what would be historically accurate as well as be correct. And again, with also comparing it to some of the professional videos I found online of other ensembles. So we ended up with a good arrangement that fell within the 4-minute time frame, that had varied tempos that worked well with the horse's trot, as well as feeling different when we went into the canter or the walk, while still being achievable for me on musical instruments, because I am only one person. I only have so many skill sets. Stringed instruments are my skill set, but even still, it's can get a bit dicey at times. So what I end up doing at this point is making a more official, what's called a click and reference track. Now, I work with 2 different virtual orchestras, and so I am using my knowledge from working with them of how to set up a click and reference track. A lot of times what that involves is, you would put the piece, when it's being arranged, into a music scoring program. It would be, as a musician, I am given, what does this music sound like as a reference track with a metronome click laid over it. And I play along and record myself along with it, and then I return that to the arrangers to do the audio engineering. And while I did not enter everything into a music score program, what I ended up doing is recording the top line at home, and I'm going to insert my reference and click track so you can hear how I kind of put that together. It starts with a sync clap, so that way everyone, when the audio engineer looks at the sound waves, it knows, where to line up the audio to start everything together. So it'll be, a countdown to a sync clap, and then countdown to this is where we start the music. And if you are recording properly, with headphones on, so that way your mic is not picking up the reference and click track, only the music that you are playing is going to be caught, and you do not have to worry about interference on your mic from the music in your headphones. So it's an interesting process. That's the basic how a lot of us musicians do it in mundane world. Sync clap in 4, 3, 2, 1, clap. 4-3 to bar 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. For the instrumentation, I ended up using instruments I already had, because that always makes it easier. I play the modern viola, so I used the modern viola on the first and second line of the Pavan and Galliard, and then I used my tenor viol da gamba on the third and fourth line, and then I used the bass viol da gamba on the fifth line. Now, a viol consort is very common in the world. Henry VIII and the 16th century. The viols were developed in northern Italy after Pope Alexander VI was made pope. He was a man of Catalan origin, and he moved to Italy and brought some of the instruments with him and the culture with him. And what ended up happening is the viol was created out of previous instruments. It has an arched bridge, so each string can be played independently on melody lines, and within the century of the English composers of the 16th and 17th century, they start seeing this instrument come from Italy, they're learning from the Italian composers and the instrumentations they're using, and the viol family, the treble viol, which is what my modern viola substitutes for, the tenor viol and the bass viol. They're looking at the instrumentation the Italians are using, and they're looking at the way that they're composing, and they're saying, yes, we're going to do that as well. By 1515, there's actually a group of, that's the earliest documentation in England, of a group of 6 Sephardic Jewish men doing a viol consort at King Henry VIII's court. So King Henry VIII was very well aware of the viol consort. He knew very much what it was. And also, upon his death in 1547, he had multiple viols, as well as many other instruments at his disposal. Now, the Pavan and Galliard were also developed in northern Italy. The Pavan came first. It is a dance piece that, ends up, being more processional, but there are livelier renditions, which is created first, and then about 40 or 50 years later, the Galliard starts being developed in northern Italy, and it gets almost immediately paired with Pavan, so you normally see like Pavan and Galliard, but there's also other types of music that can come after Pavans, but Galliards almost always come after Pavans, and where the Pavan tends to be set in like a 2, or it feels a 2, like a subdivision of 2, Galliards tend to be in subdivisions of 3, or in triples, which, gives it a very different feel than the Pavan, but it's still very nice and easy to dance to. And for the horses, for the Pas de Deux, it means that for the Pavan, for trotting, 1, 2, 1, 2, it worked really well. Whereas the different feel with the Galliard, canters are in 3, but also just it gave it a more upbeat and lifting feel of the music that we could replicate in our riding pattern. And so what ends up happening is, again, with the English 16th century court looking at the music of the Italians, they get the viol, they get the Pavans, and then, later they get the Galliards. It's really setting up this culture in the courts that Henry VIII was familiar with, and while the Pavan and Galliard of Albarti are after Henry VIII's life, the documentation, the original manuscript for it actually comes from what's known as the Lumley Part Book, which is in an English library that from about 1560. So even though Innocentio Alberti, who is the composer, is an Italian man, not very well known. There's not much left of his work. He was not the most prominent composer. His piece was in England, has been found, like the existing sheet music for it, or is in an English part book rather than an Italian one. So while King Henry VIII probably never heard this piece himself, he was familiar with Pavans and Galliards, he was familiar with the viol consort, and, it was very much part of his life, and, he's actually composed a number of pieces for different consorts and Pavans and Galliards, and he's had many written in his name. Now, for my actual recording setup, I do record in my bathroom, and I use a Yeti microphone. It's very commonplace to use an audio recording separate from your video take. So all of my videos that I took of me playing, I've actually stripped the audio from, and I put the visuals together in the iMovie app on my iPhone. And then I am using Reaper, which is a free audio sound design program for mixing the audio back together to make a single audio track. Now, I am not an expert sound engineer. I did not do any balancing. I did not do any complicated part work on this. In the music, you'll notice that it switches between pizzicato and bowing. arco for the musicians out there, to help give a little bit more texture to the piece, a little bit more variance. It's also easier to hear on horseback when our patterns are changed on the cue of the music, because sometimes going between part B and part C, which is then it switches from Pavan to Galliard, if that's our cue to canter, it can be kind of hard to hear when you're going around because you're focusing on the horse and you're riding in the pattern. And it's like, okay, if that's our cue to canter, we need to make it more distinct so that way we can canter on cue. So having it switch between pizzicato and arco, or in that case, arco back down to pizzicato, it makes it easier for us as we're riding our horses. And, it's definitely a very interesting process for me going between, again, the music aspect as well as the horseback riding aspect. It's partially interesting because I've always told people that horseback riding and music are very similar with how I approach it in my brain with, it's very technical. The small things matter. What you do in one moment matters in the next for the effects. And it's, how you manipulate your body and how you create something artistic out of it. So it's been interesting to do it from both ends of the equation in this situation. So I do hope that you come to the Atlantian Spring Coronation and watch the equestrians ride in the Pas de Deux. I do not know how many entries into the competition there will be, but if you are looking, again, I am Epy Pengelly Armiger, and I am working with Lady Catherine. Our horses are Libby and Spidey, respectively, and they will be the cutest horses out there. So thank you for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed my rendition of the Pavan and Galliard of Albarti, written by Innocencio Albarti, found in the 1560 Lumley Park books.